Hey, everybody. Good morning. It is Sunday, September 8th. Really glad to have you here today. This is a packed day for us. Very excited um, for the kind of work we're doing. I've moved rooms because there's a lot going on in my house right now. Um, this is a podcast dedicated to the state of Alabama. All right. And the reason we're going to dedicate this podcast, well, there's a couple reasons that this podcast is going to be dedicated to Alabama. The first is that on Monday evening at Common Power, we're going to host a Zoom event with Shomari Figures, who is running for the Alabama 2nd Congressional District. Mr. Figures has a great chance to win this race and to flip the congressional House seat there from Republican to Democratic. This would be a shift. This would be the 2nd Alabama U.S. House seat for the Democrats this year in that delegation. And we want to bring him to the Common Power community because we're working to support Shomari Figures. We're working to win. He's running in a historic space and territory. It goes from Montgomery in the center of the state, and then it goes west over down to Mobile. It's a big part of what's called the Black Belt there. So we're going to do that Monday evening at 6 p.m. Pacific time on Zoom. I'll include the link here. And so we're going to talk in this podcast about Mr. Figures and why we're supporting him. The second reason that this podcast is dedicated to Alabama is because this is a state that has given so much to the United States in our fight for voting justice, that what we focus on here at Common Power. It is the place that so much blood was shed. So many people stood courageously for the fight for voting rights in America that we got some of the most monumental legislation and to move us forward during the modern civil rights movement. And we will never, ever, ever forget that. We will stand with Alabama. It is core to who we are at Common Power. The third reason that we're here talking about Alabama today is because this Thursday, so 4 days from now, Dr. Terry Ann Scott and I will be beginning a learning tour, what we call a Truth and Purpose learning tour, with 30-ish people from the city of Seattle who are going on a trip with us. They're going to spend 5 days with us from Thursday through Monday evening and coming back on Tuesday, learning about the fight for racial justice, the fight for voting rights in America. We do these trips 5 to 10 times a year, Dr. Scott and I, and we love them. We treasure them. They're part of what makes us Common Power, our move from education to action. And we are starting up again our fall offerings starting this Thursday. We will then do another trip, same places, in 2.5 weeks when we take 30 plus teachers, what we call educators for democracy, on a trip like this, and we'll pay their way entirely to go on this. And then they get involved with us at Common Power. We're thrilled about that. And so with that kind of season beginning for us, we wanted to focus on Alabama. So let's start here. You may recall at the Democratic National Convention in mid-August, they did a roll call vote where each state had a chance to issue their nomination for who they wanted to be the Democratic presidential candidate. Everybody, of course, put their nominations in support of Kamala Harris for that. And it went state by state alphabetically around the country. And in that convention center in Chicago, they went state by state. The way it went is they actually started not alphabetically by allowing Delaware to go first because that's Joe Biden's state. So they went Delaware, and then they went back to alphabetical. They went to A, and Alabama is the first in the alphabet when you're going alphabetically. That was a moving moment for us because of the commitment that we have to Alabama and because of Alabama, what they've done for the United States. So I want to start here. We're going to show the Delaware, which is very short, and then Alabama.
Delaware, how do you cast your votes?
On behalf of the great state of Delaware, home of our beloved 46th President of the United States, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr.,
it is our honor to unanimously cast our 34 votes for the next President of the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris!
That, by the way, is Lisa Blunt Rochester, who is the sole Congress member, United States House member from Delaware. They only have one House seat. She is now running for the U.S. Senate in Delaware with an open seat there. She is going to be elected. She is going to be elected. She is one of two female African-American women who we expect to get elected this fall to join the U.S. Senate. There's no Black women in the U.S. Senate currently. Kamala Harris was the last one. Lisa Blunt Rochester in Delaware, and then Angela Alsobrooks in Maryland, who are working for a great deal, are going to likely get elected. That's them. Here we go.
Thank you, Delaware. Alabama, how do you cast your vote?
In a letter from the Birmingham jail, Dr. King wrote that progress is not inevitable. We have to fight for it. We have to win it. Kamala Harris will protect the legacy and the progress that we've made by our forefathers and our foremothers, and she will advance it. She will safeguard our freedom to vote by passing the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. She will fight for freedom and opportunity and build an economy that works for everyone. So, from Huntsville to Mobile, from the Black Belt to the Wiregrass, from the historic civil rights cities of Birmingham, Montgomery, and my hometown of Selma, from the people who brought us the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, the proud great state of Alabama proudly cast 56 votes for the first Black woman president of the United States of America, Kamala Harris, and the next vice president, Tim Walz.
That is pretty much the whole kit and caboodle right there, folks, for what we care about. That kind of energy, that determination, that commitment to the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, from the 64 and the 65 Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts, from the Black Belt to the Wiregrass, from the civil rights cities of Birmingham, Montgomery, and Selma, Alabama casts its votes for Kamala Harris to be the next nominee for the Democratic Party presidential ticket. Common Power is working and has been working in Selma, in Montgomery, in Birmingham for, we've been going there since 2014 on trips. We're honored to have built great partnerships in the state, to have connections with people that truly teach us and that we love, and they love and support us. What an incredible space, what an incredible honor. In 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a surprising decision. There had been a case brought by a Alabama resident, a citizen by the name of Evan Milligan. Evan Milligan and a coalition of civil rights and voting rights organizations have brought a case arguing that the Alabama U.S. House districts were unfairly gerrymandered, unfairly racially gerrymandered. They argued that the drawing of the maps by the Republican dominated legislature had targeted African Americans and had taken them and specifically done two things: that they had cracked and they had packed African Americans in unfair ways. And that the result was that Black voters in Alabama were not given a fair chance to elect their candidates. Under the Voting Rights Act of 1965, there's been an established test known as the Jingles test, which is used to assess when districts are unfairly racially gerrymandered. There's a couple different dimensions that go into the Jingles test. They're what the Supreme Court has determined in case after case must be met. And if all three of the elements of the Jingles test, there's three elements, if all three are met, then the conclusion is that the gerrymandering that's been done has been done for racial purposes and has been done unfairly, in all cases, when it's been found, by white citizens to the detriment of African American, or, as was found in the state of Washington just last year, against Latino voters in the Yakima Valley. So you have to redraw the districts when the Jingles test has been found to be met. Evan Milligan, with a coalition of voters, argued that the Alabama population, which is 27% African American in the state, had been unfairly racially gerrymandered into really one predominant congressional district. They've been packed. That's where this packed comes in. Packed into one congressional district, the 7th, the Alabama 7th, and had been cracked across other districts so that they did not get to be a significant percentage of those other districts. So you can pack them into one district under racial gerrymandering, and then you crack them by breaking up the rest of them into these smaller increments so that they never get to be a significant percentage of the other 6 congressional districts. There's 7 total in Alabama, and they've been packed into the 7th, and then they've been cracked across the other districts. When you're 27% of the population, if it was a straight up fair representation of the state by race, then you would get 2 out of 7 congressional districts where Black voters would have a significant chance to elect their candidate. That had not been done. Milligan argued that this was the case, that this was what had happened, and that Black voters have been packed and cracked by the Alabama state legislature in their drawing of districts. And the Supreme Court looked at this and they said, we agree. Even though the Supreme Court is monumentally conservative, it was so blatant. What had been done was so racially unacceptable that this Supreme Court ruled 5-4 to uphold the Milligan argument and told the state of Alabama that they needed to go back and redraw their districts. A couple key characteristics of the Jingles test are that there has to be a historical number of minority voters that can be identified over time and that have cultural legacy of interwovenness. They can't just be a bunch of folks who make up a large minority population. They have to have a cultural history. In Alabama, this is the case. That's just one part of the Jingles test. You have to have this history, a significant number, and you have to have a history of connectivity among these voters. In the part of the state that's known as the Black Belt, which stretches really from the eastern, the Georgia state line, which is on the east, west through Tuskegee, Montgomery, Selma, and Mobile, with Birmingham in the north and Mobile in the south. they were this was met. The Jingles test was met. There's a large number in this of African American voters in this area, and they have a long history and tradition of being culturally connected, traditions, religious backings, geographical histories. And so the court said, "Yep, it is the case. You meet the first part of the Jingles test." A second part of the Jingles test, if you're trying to figure out if there's a racial gerrymandering going on, is you have to be able to show that there's what's called racially polarized voting occurring. If there's racially polarized voting, then the way you know this is that the white voters vote overwhelmingly for one candidate, and the minority group population voters vote overwhelmingly for a different candidate. Under the Jingles test, if this is the case, then the larger majority population can overwhelm the minority population in their total votes. If they're packing and cracking them, they can overwhelm them because the racial discrepancies are so substantial in the voting patterns. And Alabama has this racially polarized voting. 80+% of white voters vote for the Republican candidate election after election, and 80+% vote of African American voters vote for the Democratic candidate election after election. This is racially polarized. If you then pack African Americans into one district and crack them across other districts, what you're doing is you're saying to the white population, you get the chance in 6 out of 7 districts to elect your candidate of choice because you have the numerical numbers and you have the racially polarized voting in place. So the first 2 elements of the Jingles test were met. And the third part of the Jingles test is that the minority population, the minority group, needs to be geographically compact enough, connected, close by each other, in order to reasonably constitute a congressional district that could be drawn and be reasonable. So they have to be close enough. They have to make sense that they could draw them. Like you can't have a portion way up here in this part of the state, another portion down here. They have to be compact enough. The Supreme Court concluded that in the state of Alabama, the white Republican legislature had gerrymandered Black voters out of a second congressional district. They had packed the 7th congressional district, which is where Representative Terry Sewell represents Alabama. She was the woman speaking on behalf of the Alabama delegation when they were nominating Kamala Harris. That is Representative Sewell. And then they had the white Republican legislature had cracked African-American citizens across the remaining 6 congressional districts, so they were never a significant enough percentage to overcome the racially polarized voting that white voters were able to enact. That's how racial gerrymandering works to a T. And it was so bad in Alabama that this conservative Supreme Court said, you got to go back and draw other districts. It was so bad actually in the state next door in Louisiana that the Supreme Court said the same to Louisiana. And so Louisiana has a second, also had exactly the same thing had happened. They'd packed and they'd cracked. And now they're adding a second congressional district that is a majority minority district in both Alabama and in Louisiana. So they're giving African Americans a significant percentage of the voters in a second congressional district in both states in this election. That the reason they've been able to do it in Alabama, again, is because of this stretch known as the Black Belt and this compactness. And the second congressional district, where Mr. Shomari Figures is running for the Congress, runs from Montgomery in the center of the state, the first capital of the Confederacy, and what's commonly referred to as the birthplace of civil rights in the United States, with the bus boycott of 1955, down to Mobile. And it was in Mobile that a lynching occurred in, I believe it was in 1981. Yes, that was done by members of the Ku Klux Klan that Shomari Figures, his father, Michael Figures, as a lawyer, helped to prosecute the Klan for that lynching. 1981. 1981. Helped to prosecute the Klan for that lynching and bankrupted the Klan. And so Shomari Figures' father was an attorney who fought for justice and helped to break the Klan because they beat the Klan in court. They sued them and made them responsible financially for this murder. And Shomari Figures' mother is a state senator today in the state of Alabama. This is the Figures family. And Michael Shomari Figures now is running for office. Shomari is somebody who is a rising star. He spoke at the Democratic National Convention. He worked on Barack Obama's campaign, and then he went into the White House of the Obama administration and worked as a domestic director of presidential personnel. Worked in the housing and human services area, in the housing and urban development, and has gone back to Alabama, and he's continued to work there. He worked for Biden and Harris. He's married. He's got 3 children, and he's running for Congress. We've been honored to support Shomari as he ran in the Democratic primary earlier this year in Alabama. And then he was one of 2 finalists to move on, and he was in a runoff election, and we worked for him again. One of our staff members who lives in Selma, Celestria Hill, has been very active in working with the campaign. And this group that's going with us from Seattle on a learning tour we start this coming Thursday. A group of them is going to stay after the trip is over to knock doors, to mobilize voters for Mr. Figures. They're going to spend a couple days there in Montgomery knocking doors for Shomari Figures. This is the work of Common Power, from the past to the present, all of us making a difference, going further together. So we're going to bring Mr. Figures to a Zoom on Monday. It's going to be actually hosted initially by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which supports people running for the U.S. House around the country. The head of the DCCC, what's known as the D-Trip, the DCCC, for this year is a Washington State Representative, Susan Delbenny. Susan Delbenny was born in Selma. She's part of a group of representatives in Selma, 1 from Alabama and 2 from Washington State, that are known as the Selma Caucus. The first one is Terry Sewell, who represents the state and represents Alabama and is from Selma. Then there's Susan Delbenny, who represents the Washington congressional seat here, the first. And the third member of that Selma caucus is Marilyn Strickland. Representative Strickland represents the Washington 10th Congressional District. She's from Tacoma, and she has made a trip to Alabama as part of a congressional civil rights pilgrimage that was started by the late John Lewis and continues today. And she has been there and has been moved by the history and by the work today. Those 3 folks are what's known as a Selma caucus, and Representative Delbenny today is going to, tomorrow on our call, is going to host and introduce Shomari Figures, and is going to ask people to support her. This is an opportunity to get to know him, and for those that are interested and willing and able to provide financial support, that's great. We're not asking all of you to provide that. If you do, that's a choice you make. We, however, just wanted to introduce Mr. Figures to the Common Power community because we are working to get him elected. It will be a historical election. It will be the first time in Alabama history. They started as a state in 1819. It'll be the first time in over 200 years that the state will have a fairly drawn congressional map, and we're going to help to elect Shomari Figures there. Susan Delbenny is going to introduce Mr. Figures, and then Charles Douglas, our executive director, and myself are going to do some question and answer with Mr. Figures. Charles has got a chance to spend some time with Shomari. A wonderful connection. I'm familiar and have gotten embedded deeply in Alabama life with people that we've met over time on our trips. And so we're going to do a little Q&A with him. This is Monday, 6 to 7 p.m. on Zoom. I'll send the link along with this podcast. We want to introduce you right now to Mr. Figures. And as you watch this clip, it's the campaign video made by him and about him. Just allow the images and the history and the strength and the determination and the resilience and the moment that we're in, allow it to come through, please. Allow it to get very real as we take this in.
Alabama is home. For me, this is where it begins. The story of what made me begins in Clark County, Alabama. At a time when many black people were moving north to bigger cities, my grandparents came a little further south, to Mobile. One of my grandfathers found work in the local paper mill, and he was a preacher. My other grandfather was a proud Union man on the railroad. With my grandmothers, they raised families with the goal to provide their children a future with more opportunities than they had for themselves. And they did just that. They put their children into colleges and law schools, into the ministry and the military, into positions in corporate America, and as owners of small businesses. My parents chose the path of public service. As a lawyer, my father worked in Mobile and across the Black Belt to expand civil rights, and he led the effort to bring down the Klan. My mother has spent her career fighting to improve public education and health outcomes in Alabama. My parents would ultimately spend the majority of their careers in Montgomery as state senators. They taught me the necessity of using your God-given gifts to better society. That's why I became a lawyer. And that's why I went to work for President Obama in the White House, and then went on to work in Congress and across federal government, all with the goal of trying to make this country better. Now we have a chance to make this district better. The district that gave birth to the movement that showed the world what it meant to put life and freedom on the line in the name of forcing America to be true to what it said on paper. Now we can put a spotlight on issues and communities that have too often been left in the shadows of neglect. We can show our teachers and social workers that we care about you. And we recognize that every year you're asked to do more with less. We can show our nurses and healthcare professionals that we appreciate you, and that America owes you much more than just a label of frontline worker for all that you did to pull us through the pandemic. We can show our veterans and service members and all of our public service workers who play a role in keeping us safe that we see you, and that we have an obligation to get you the resources for you to be the best that you can possibly be for all of us. And I can do this. I've worked in all three branches of federal government. I know how government works, and I know we can make it work for this district. We can make it work to prioritize supporting our small businesses and the workers who make them go. We can make it work to reduce poverty and eliminate barriers and systems that make it much tougher for some people to better their circumstances. And as the child of a woman who became a single mother in the blink of an eye, I know we can make government work to ensure that we support women who are the backbone of Alabama. We can make government work to protect our seniors and fight for access to quality, affordable health care and ensure women have the right to make decisions over their own bodies. We can make it work to make the promise of America a little more real for the people of Alabama who are so proud to call this district home. Our time is now, and our mission is clear. We can do this, and we can do it together. Let's go. My name is Shomari Figures, and I am running for Congress in the new District 2, and I approve this message.
Wow. That just cuts me deep. So much there, so much that we at Common Power are committed to. So much, so much, so much. It's our honor to do this work for Mr. Figures. We'll be given the opportunity. We will be giving the opportunity to Common Power members to travel to work for him. Details to come on that. Just so much there. At the end, he says, let's go. That's something we say at Common Power, something I like to say. We all are committed to going and doing something, in the words of Michelle Obama. Yesterday or 2 days ago on the podcast, we talked about the powers of stories, the ways in which the narratives that we tell and we believe in shape us. That's a story of a family that has changed America for the better. We get the chance to help one of them get to Congress. Join us Monday night. Hear it directly from Shomari Figures. And then join us in the next 2 months when we go and do some work for him. There's already a group from Seattle going at the end of this coming trip that are going to do that work for him, led by one of our staff colleagues and the campaign. Let's go, folks. The promise of America. That's what he ended with, the promise of America. That's Kamala Harris's language. It's the language of America, the language of possibility. It's a powerful story. Let's go.